Welcome back. Welcome back to the Listen Man podcast. You know, the show that's for fans by a fan. Listen, can you hear it? Can you hear the music? Are you getting in your stance? Are you starting to dance and shuffle a little bit, getting them hands going? It's like Rocky, ready to go against Apollo Creed. We have Michael Jordan versus LeBron James today, the GOAT of all GOAT conversations we will discuss on our podcast and show today. Who is the greatest? Is it LeBron? Is it Mike? We are going to answer that question today. Once and for all, it will be finished after you watch this show. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend it with me. Hopefully you have a good time. If you like, make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe, follow. Make sure that you share with your family, your friends, people you don't like, enemies. If they like sports, send them my way. Let's make the voice of the fans the loudest voice that's out there. And I can only do that with your help. So are you ready to get into this GOAT conversation? Let's go. Let's get ready. Right, the main event, the card that everybody's waiting for and discussing and talking about. In this corner, in year 19, going on year 20, Mr. LeBron James. And in this corner, we have someone that played 15 years, six-time NBA champion. Man, LeBron versus Mike. Who do you have? Who's your GOAT? Maybe it's somebody else. But for today's episode, we're going to talk about them. We're going to see who truly is the GOAT. And maybe the Listen Man podcast will finally put an end to this debate once and for all. We're going to look at it a lot differently than what we see on TV. We're going to look at it from a fan's perspective. And what that simply means is we're going to look at different factors across the board as fans to try to be unbiased about it and let the facts just speak. Okay? That's how we're going to try to do it. We're not going to let our heart get involved. We're not going to wear our emotions on our sleeves. We're not going to do any of that today. We're just going to talk and we're going to look at some things. So let's look at some facts, okay? So head-to-head comparisons. Let's look at LeBron versus Mike. So Michael Jordan's career average, 30 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. Now, when you think about that, that probably surprised some people who maybe are pro LeBron. Because oftentimes they just think of Mike as a scorer. But for a career average, 6 rebounds and 5 assists. So think about that. Mike played in the 90s. Guess what the 90s had? They had centers. Every team had 7-footers that protected the rim and that rebounded. And then on top of it, they would have a power forward whose main job was to rebound. A la round mound to rebound Charles Barkley, who was known for rebounding. So for a guard, the average 6 rebounds a game in that era was extremely difficult and very rare. But look at the one that kind of stands out. Did you notice? 5 assists per game. Now, oftentimes people think of Mike as just someone of a ball hog, a chucker, somebody that just once the ball sinks to him, that's it. But he averaged 5 assists a game. Maybe it's that you didn't realize Mike averaged for his career. What about LeBron? LeBron averaged 27 points so far his career, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. So that's kind of what we expect from Bron, right? He's 6'8", 6'9", 260, 265. So we would expect him to average 7 rebounds a game. But think about that. That's only 1 more rebound more than Mike. In a league with no centers, in a league that's way more free-flowing than it was with Mike and him. 1 more rebound. and then only 2 more assists more than Mike averaged for his career. And we know that one of LeBron's strengths is his passing game. In fact, when he first was coming out, a lot of people were saying that they didn't want to compare him to Mike, even though LeBron wore 23 because of Mike. They were comparing him to maybe more Magic Johnson, more Oscar Robertson type player, because he was pass first, more team involved, more so than just scoring. But the numbers are the numbers. So career-wise, he averaged 1 rebound more and 2 assists more than Mike did. It's a pretty interesting category for statistics, right? Now let's look at something else. In order to be the GOAT of something, it means that you have to do something. Right? There's a saying that they say the best ability is what? It's availability, right? Now it's not the end all be all, but availability does count. Just like it counts for the MVP race, they want to see you play in the games in order to qualify to be the MVP, right? So now think about this. And these are just stats, and then we'll discuss them. It's not leaning one way or the other. We're just literally throwing out facts to try to get a real good baseline of what we're talking about here. All right. Michael Jordan, in 15 seasons, played all 82 regular season games, 9 of 15 seasons. Think about that. Missing only maybe 8 to 10 games a season for most of your career and playing a whole full regular season 9 times. Now, LeBron, we understand it. And I'm going to read exactly what it says here. LeBron James, load management has changed expectations in LeBron's era, and he has played all 82 games only once in his 20-year career. One time. So now in episode 1 of Listen Man, we talked about the load management, didn't we? We talked about how it impacts the game from a fan's perspective. But in this case, we could even see how it may impact the GOAT status for LeBron. That being available is crucial when you start talking about the GOAT. It just is. The fact that he only did it one time. That was a stat that kind of blew my mind, to be honest with you. But here's something else. Oftentimes people will talk again about age, and they talk about LeBron and how he looks. And man, he does look fantastic for 39 years old. I mean, he looks great. He's still flying up and down the court. He's still dunking. He's still scoring. He looks fantastic. So let's just do a comparison, because oftentimes some of the statistics that kind of get lost is they try to compare Michael's last few years in the league with LeBron's. And there's some good stats here that sometimes, again, I think is swept under the rug from media, from players' perspective, from some of the commentators' perspective as well. When did Michael Jordan go to the Wizards? At what age was he? He was 38. 38 years old. I think sometimes we forget that, and we think that Mike was maybe 35 or something when he went to the Washington Wizards. He was 38, coming off of his second retirement. So he had been away from the league for almost 2 years when he came back at 38 years old. So think of that. 38 and coming back to play in the NBA. So that means he played 2 seasons there, so he played until he was 40. So when we talk longevity, sometimes we forget that Mike did play at 38, 39, and 40, just as LeBron is playing at 39. But what's the comparison? Let's look at the stats. Let's let the stats talk. And I'm not a stat-heavy guy, but in this heavyweight bout, you got to have the stats. You got to have the numbers to just make some honest comparisons and not just be biased towards one or the other, okay? So, Michael Jordan's 2 years at Wizards, from playing from the age 38 to 40, he averaged 23 points, 5 assists, and 6 rebounds. You catch that? From 38 to 40, those 2 years, he averaged 23 points, 5 assists, and 6 rebounds. Does that shock you? I know it shocked me a little bit, because I was always of the mindset that those years were terrible in Washington.
Terrible, crazy knucklehead, terrible.
When you hear commentators talk about it and players talk about it, they talk about it like it was just ugly to watch. Maybe compared to his golden years, maybe it was hard for some to watch. I remember Michael blocking somebody with two hands after he got the ball stolen from him. He trailed him down and pinned it up against the glass and then came down. So I still remember some great moments where Mike showed that he still was Michael Jordan. Now, what about LeBron? Right now, LeBron is averaging 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists. So, again, LeBron's having a spectacular season at age 39. 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists. So that's actually up assist-wise from his career average. And that makes sense too, because you're not able to move and do as much as you normally did. So you're going to depend on your teammates a little bit more as you get older. But that's an interesting stat, isn't it? To see the comparisons of the two around 38 and 39. Still very similar. I know I was a little bit shocked. I was expecting LeBron's numbers to be so much more inflated than Mike's at that age. But it's fairly close. But here's something that's interesting as well. In those 2 seasons in Washington, between 38 and 40, Mike missed 22 games in 2 seasons. 22 games. LeBron this year has already missed 27 games. Excuse me, last year. Missed 27 games last year. This year he's played 62 games. So think of that. Mike, between 38 and 40, only missed 22 games in 2 seasons at that age. Whereas LeBron missed more than that last year, 27 games last year. So there are some stats. We have facts about LeBron and we have stats about Michael. But where the real debate comes in, oftentimes comes into the player itself. Maybe it's the mindset. People who say that Michael Jordan is the GOAT, it's because he had that killer instinct. He had that I'm not going to allow you to win mentality. And for a lot of us, we gravitate towards that. If that's the era we grew up in, that's how we grew up. Think about it. If you played high school basketball, our era, the coach put the piece of paper up on the door and whoever made the team was on that piece of paper. So if you made the team, you looked at the rest of the names on that team and you were either on a really good team or you were on a team that was a bit suspect or you were on a terrible team. And if you were the best player on the team, you would look at that list and say, I got a lot of work to do. And some people would say that that built character in a player to be able to make players around them better, also carry the team and elevate the team to perhaps get more wins than anybody might have expected based on who was on the team. So for some people, that killer instinct, being able to carry the load and take over games, is what causes them to look at Mike as the GOAT. And then you have some in this era that kind of come up in the AAU era. Now that'll be a show for another day, to be honest with you. That'll be a whole nother topic. AAU and private school transference of players. Is that a good thing or not? We'll talk about that another time. But in this instance, in this era, LeBron kind of came up in that AAU and then going to private schools to where some will say that maybe the competition isn't as high. Yeah, you may play 1 or 2 top high schools in the country like Oak Hill, something, but you only do that once. The rest of the year, maybe you're not playing great competition. So many will say, well, LeBron was the GOAT because he came up in the era of AAU, traveling and playing the best in the country. And that's the reason why they would say that it transfers over to the NBA. So his mentality is different. He didn't have to have the killer instinct because he was always on good teams and he could spread and distribute the ball around to make players better that way. So in both cases, both players can make players around them better. It's just in different ways. So depending on what you like will determine whether or not you view one as the GOAT or not. But again, 2 words always make the biggest impact. All time. Greatest of all time. time is undefeated, as I said before. So that simply means if you are the greatest of all time, somebody literally should be able to take you from this era and put you in this era or in this era or in this era, and you dominate the same way you dominate your era in that era. So this, to me, is where the GOAT conversation starts to teeter just a tiny bit. And the reason why I say that is simple. There is a huge difference between this era of basketball and the era of, let's just go 2010 back. There's a huge difference. So just like we did with the NFL, let's look at the NBA. Let's look at some of the rules that have changed. And then you tell me whether or not you feel like it has helped or hurt the GOAT conversation. So nowadays, the hand check rule is gone. So in the 90s, defenders were allowed to use their hands to impede offensive players. Hand checking was common, making it tougher for players to drive to the hoop. Today, the NBA introduced the no hand check rule in the mid 2000s. This change reduced physical contact, sped up the game, and emphasized skill over force. Offensive players now have more freedom to attack the basket without much resistance. Okay, so let's start with the hand check rule. And let's go ahead and put it in play. LeBron plays in an era where there's no hand check. In other words, as we just read the rule, it makes it easier and they have more freedom to attack the basket without resistance for much of it. Now, Mike played in an era where hand checking was allowed, which meant players could grab you. You could pull on you. They can push you. So if you're driving to the basket, they might put their hand on their hip to get you to move off of your spot just a little bit. Now imagine if we put Michael in the era today. What would Mike do? We said he averaged 30 points a game. Think of Michael Jordan. And if you're younger, go to YouTube and just look up Michael Jordan highlights. And tell me what you think he would do with no hand checking. You know what else is missing today? The big man. There's no one back there to protect rims. Only a few teams actually have true big men. Now the big men are out on the wings because they're shooting threes. So that lane is wide open. Could you imagine Michael Jeffrey Jordan with no hand checking, being able to play freely the way that they play now with minimal defense and having pass to the rim? Me personally, I would say he might average 45 a game between being able to do that and fouls being called. So there's one rule that would go pro towards Michael Jordan. Because if we took LeBron and put him in the 90s, where there was hand checking, I think he would still be great. But I just feel like he would struggle more as he did early on in his career in this era. Remember, he struggled against Boston. He struggled against Detroit because they were physical. And it took him teaming up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami to finally get over that hurdle in order to do that. Similar to Mike. Mike had to go through the bad boy Pistons and Boston and some of those teams, the Knicks, that beat him up. And Mike had to bulk up and he had to change his game a little bit in order to get past those teams. So LeBron would be great, no doubt. However, there were centers back then. We did have Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, and Tim Duncan. We did have centers at every single position. At every team. Every team had a center. Some of them were superstars, some of them were just okay, but they had centers. Dikembe Mutombo was there. And then you go to power forwards. Could you imagine if LeBron played power forward? He's banging against Karl Malone, who had a body just like he does. Charles Barkley, Shawn Kemp, the Davis brothers in Indiana. That would take a toll on LeBron. It would have definitely forced him to develop a jumper early in his career. And even a small forward slot. He would have been playing against the likes of Scottie Pippen, He struggled with Kawhi Leonard for some years. Could you imagine Scottie Pippen D'ing him up full court? It would have definitely made it tough on LeBron. So though LeBron would still have been great, more likely would have been an all-star, even though I feel like based on the rules, it may have taken him a little bit longer. I do feel as if LeBron would have been good. He would not have dominated the way that he dominates now. Because back then, the way the game was played, you had to have an offensive repertoire in order to get past some of these teams that were so defensively stacked and played so physical. And referees were not blowing the whistle the way that they blow the whistle today. So in that rule, I'm going to say advantage Mike. Hand checking. All right. So let's go to another one. Kind of falls in the same category. The no forearm check rule. In the 90s, defenders could use their forearms to create space and defend. So this allowed players to excel in the mid-range. Today, no forearm check rule further reduced physical contact. Defenders rely more on footwork, and the mid-range game has diminished. So now, we're able to see something else that highlights the lack of physicality in today's game. So again, if we were to take the all-time aspect and put Mike in this era, as we just talked about, with no hand checking, no forearm checking, and let's not even get into the fact that players don't want contact, they flop. It's an epidemic of flopping.
And the Oscar for Best Picture is presented to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
It needs to stop. Again, that will be a whole nother episode dealing with competition nowadays that we'll talk about as fans. But for this topic, can we see era differences? That if you were to put LeBron James in Michael Jordan's era, do you think LeBron would excel the way that he does now in that era? As a fan, I would say he would still be great. It may have took him some more time to develop, but I don't know that he would dominate. And think about it, if he played in the same era at Mike in their prime, do you think people would say that he was better than Mike? That's a question that you have to answer. And think of the many players that played with Mike. Magic. People said Mike was the best player on the floor. Bird said that he was Jesus Christ in tennis shoes. And that's Larry Bird, who shared the court with Mike. Charles Barkley, Gary Payton, Sean Kemp. All of these guys that were Hall of Famers were great, but they were not Michael Jordan. So the question would be, if LeBron played in that era, would he rival Michael Jordan? And then if we put Mike in today's era, would Mike rival LeBron James? So as a fan, I would say advantage Michael Jordan. In both eras, Michael still would be Michael. In today's era, based on the statistics and the rules alone, we could say that Mike would average at least 10 points higher than what he averages throughout his career, which was 30 points. So we could say easy another 10 points. That's a little over 2 points a quarter. You don't think Mike could get an almost another 2 points a quarter? A little more than that? Just from the foul line? Whereas LeBron averaged 27 points in his career. We're saying that he would average that in the 90s when Mike played. Do we think that he would average 27 or more? I don't know. That would be a tough one. What do you guys think? I'll be interested to see the comments because it's just a debate. And as fans, we love having these debates, don't we? I just wanted to look at it from a different perspective because I never hear anybody talk about time and how time is key in these debates. You have to be able to swap players in order to say that they are the greatest of all time. And you have to combine the rules and determine whether or not they're going to excel. So what do you think? Is it Mike? Is it LeBron? based on what we just discussed for a few minutes, those stats, who do you choose? I'll be real interested to see what the comments say. So tell me, after we discuss all of these things, who do you have? Do you have LeBron? Do you have Mike? Who is your GOAT? Well, I'm sure the debate's going to continue on, but hopefully the Listen Man show today maybe made it a little easier for you to determine who the GOAT is. So leave some comments for me. Let me know what you thought about today's show. Let me know what you thought about some of the stats. Were there some things in there that you didn't know about either player? Or are there some things that I missed? Please let me know as well. I'd love to get some feedback from you. And maybe somewhere down the line, we'll come back and talk about this show again. We know it's going to continue to be a hot topic. As long as time moves, we're going to talk about these two as the greatest of all time. So which one do you have? And did you notice something, family? Did you notice that we talked about it without bashing one player over the other? Emotions didn't get too high, did it? Nobody got upset or angry about it. We just compared information. We looked at stats. We looked at the rules in the era. And we said, based on this, we can come up with who would truly be the GOAT. That's a beautiful thing. In fact, that's what this whole podcast is created for. There's enough negativity out there. We're going to promote positivity. And we can talk. We can even disagree. But we're going to do it in a way that promotes positivity, people. That's what it's about. And you know, as the host, I could try to sway people one way or the other. I really could. But I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, you know? I'm trying to just stay right in the middle. I don't want to try to encourage you to be on one side or the other, you know? I'm just trying to just do my job. I really just want to, host. And then as we get to the end like this, be able to just do a nice little wrap up without trying to sway you in one direction or the other. So we're not going to get too emotional, family. Nope. We're not going to wear our emotions on our sleeves. No. See, we're not going to try to get extra points off of our chest. Nope. Not at all. So there's no need to figure out who I think the GOAT is. Because it doesn't matter, does it? I'm just the host. You guys can tell who I think the GOAT is. But now you tell me who you think the GOAT is. Man, that's another episode. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure that you hit the thumbs up, subscribe, follow, and as I always say, share, share, share. Let's go ahead and make the fans' voice the loudest voice that's out there by tuning into the Listen Man podcast, the show for the fans, by the fan. And all I can say is thank you, and we'll see you on the next show where we'll talk about something else that no doubt is going to get them brain cells firing. So as I always say, stay positive, keep smiling. Don't worry about the negativity. Just focus on positive things and things will always be all right. We'll see you on the next show. And as I always end with, let's go.